Welcome to the full guide on how to actually overcome OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. My name is Austin Saleya, and I have suffered with OCD for, I would say, the better part of 15 to 20 years. Now, I just want to tell you, as someone who is obviously suffering with OCD, that I understand your pain. Okay, I am not a doctor. I am just somebody that has completely been enveloped and taken over by this debilitating disease in my life. It has caused me the most immense pain. Nobody understands it. I know that you understand right there because you experience it. And the problem with this disease is, like, I look around in my own life, nobody actually gets it, right? Nobody gets it. My mom doesn't get it. My dad doesn't get it. They think they get it, but like they don't really truly understand as if they were experiencing it. Nobody actually understands this disease unless they experience it for themselves. And the problem is, if you look at your life typically, people probably think you have things together. You probably have a job. You probably can function pretty highly in your life because you can keep things pretty organized. You are pretty smart, right? You're very organized and you can be very analytical in a lot of things. But when it comes to this disease, it is extremely difficult, debilitating. And honestly, sometimes it just stops you in your tracks in life. And honestly, it can get to the point where you just don't want to go on anymore. And I know because I've been there. So I just want to let you know, you are not alone. You right there in the screen, you are not alone. Don't give up. Do not quit. I'm going to teach you exactly in this full guide how to beat this disease. It's something that can't be beat forever. It's not something where you can just fix it. It's something that has to be practiced day in and day out, but it gets easier. And with time, it gets to a point where you can get a hold on this. You can get a grip on it and you can get your life back. I promise you, I've gotten mine back. And I'm going to teach you in this exact guide how to exactly get your life back in a step-by-step process, okay? So the first thing though is you need to understand this. You have to take full responsibility for your OCD. That's the only way that you will get healed. So let's start in. Let's just jump right into this, okay? How to actually overcome OCD. Here on the left, you can see here's me before when I was experiencing OCD pretty heavily. I was overweight. I was unhappy. I was depressed, obviously, because I was being tortured mentally day in, day out by this thing that we call OCD. Here's me now, super happy. I have my life back. I can function. I have happiness. And everything's great. This was a time in my life where I was super depressed. I was at a point where I wanted to just end absolutely everything because the mental torture that I was under from this amount of OCD was just at a point where I just could not handle it anymore. Now I'm off my medication. I don't have to go see therapists anymore. I've completely have a handle on my OCD. I'm able to live a normal life. I'm happy. I have friends. I can function in society. And so I want to teach you exactly how to do the same thing in your life so that you can just get your life back and be happy and not want to just, most likely if you've experienced debilitating OCD to the point where you can't function, you don't want to go on. You don't even want to live. I'll just be straight up. You don't want to live. Okay. So let's go to the next thing. What actually is OCD? Okay. A lot of people don't know what OCD really is. I know for me, when I was young, like if I went back to the first time that I really learned what OCD was or what I thought OCD was, I remember I used to watch the TV show Monk. I don't know if you're familiar with Monk, but basically what Monk is it's a TV show where it was this guy and he was a detective and he lost his wife. She was murdered and she was murdered in this car garage. Now, here's the thing is he could never figure out like how she got murdered. So he kind of went on this spree where he was super determined to figure out like everyone else's murder, solve everyone's murder, and then including his wife's murder. But he never solved his wife's murder for a very long time till pretty much the end of the show. But he used this situation, basically his wife's murder. Well, he didn't use it. It was this traumatic situation that kind of spurred on his OCD. He had this situation happen, and then all of a sudden, these OCD tendencies came out very heavily. And he was very articulate in the way that he saw things. He would see the details that nobody else would see. And so, of course, they naturally would bring him into all the crime scenes, and he had the record-breaking like ability to just solve like pretty much any crime scene that was there. He would see things, he would put together details that nobody else would put together. The show was just an amazing show because he would like think of things that absolutely nobody else would think of, and even you as a viewer wouldn't think of, and you'd be like, oh my goodness, why didn't I think of that? That's absolutely genius, which is a good thing because you have a superpower here. Okay, you need to realize that. We'll get to that later on in this course. But it was funny because he had an assistant. First name was Sharona. He got another assistant named Natalie. But I remember them always having to help him outside of the crime scene. Like I remember always like he would show up to the crime scene and he would go like to his assistant, and she would come up running with like a bag of wipes, and then hand him the wipes, and he would like wipe off his hands to like pick up like the little thing at the crime scene to like pick up tweezers. He would grasp the tweezers with the wipes to pick up it could be like a little shoe that was at the crime scene, or a piece of like a stick or tinfoil or whatever, the evidence was at the crime scene. And then he would go on to solve this murder in a matter of minutes, and everybody would be like, what? But he like had this debilitating disease where then like he'd get back into the car and he couldn't even touch the handles to get back into the car. And it was just kind of this funny dichotomy, right? Going back and forth where he couldn't even get back into his car. He had to have his assistant come and help him to get back into his house, right? And to organize his mail, or even bring in the mail because he didn't want to touch it because it was contaminated, or open the mail, or go through the mail, or even bring in his groceries and clean the groceries from the grocery store to make sure that they weren't contaminated, and then contaminate his fridge and contaminate him, and then make sure he wasn't going to contaminate other people from the groceries, for example. So it was this weird thing where he was somewhat of this like superstar detective, and yet he like couldn't function in his day-to-day life, and he needed this assistant all the time with him. In the beginning, I thought like, okay, well, OCD is just cleanliness. It's just like this obsessive need to be clean. Well, I was completely wrong. Okay, I was completely wrong. But I had a little bit of more of an idea of what it was compared to the average person, because I knew that there was this fear of contamination. There was this fear of being like, of getting somebody else sick, or fear of getting yourself sick, or fear of not having everything just right or in just the perfect order. For example, Monk had to have he'd wear the same clothes every day, and everything had to be perfectly in order in his house. His apartment was exactly like symmetrical, and everything had to be that way. But a lot of people don't understand that there's multiple types of OCD. Okay, so that's the first thing that people don't understand. There's a lot of different types of OCD, and I didn't really understand this until later, and we'll get into this. The second misconception is a lot of people will say, and I'm sure you've heard this, they'll go and they'll say, oh, well, it's just my OCD. I'm overthinking. It's just my OCD. Or they'll be like, oh, like I got to keep my house clean. It's just my OCD. But like, part of me gets frustrated with that, because it's like, that's your OCD? Is just the fact that you're clean, or the fact that you like to keep things in order, like a little bit. Like, you don't actually suffer, like truly, truly suffer with the mental torture of you driving to work, hitting a bump and thinking that you ran over a person. Having that sheer guilt come in that you've killed somebody, having to go back, get off the freeway, go back and check again to see if you've hit somebody, realize that you didn't hit somebody, have this immense feeling of relief come over you, and then all of a sudden you think, oh no, maybe that wasn't the exact spot where the bump was. The guilt comes back like this, and then you have to go back and check again and make sure it wasn't in the other spot. And so you go back and check, and you do this over and over and over again. And this is on the way to work, by the way. And next thing you know, you're 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes late to work. Next thing you know, you lose your job. Next thing you know, you can't function. Next thing you know, you can't pay for your groceries. Next thing you know, you can't pay for your rent. Next thing you know, you're guilt-ridden in bed because you literally believe that you've killed people before. And it's this mental disease that you can't think your way out of. It's not something that's just like, oh, well, just be logical. Like, I can't stand when people say that, because those same people don't understand, because they don't actually have this disorder that we have. They just don't get it. So when they say like, oh, it's just my OCD, it's like, no, that's just an obsessive thought. You don't have an actual like biological neurochemical disorder going on in your brain, or you haven't experienced a traumatic event that has triggered this. You've not actually gone through something that has made you have an obsessive compulsive disorder. Okay, so let's break it down. Let's break down what actually is obsessive compulsive disorder, because there's 3 parts to this. Okay, so the first thing is the obsession. So first of all, we need to be obsessed about something. Now, a lot of people think it's just an obsession about anything. Like, oh, like I'm obsessed about mangoes, and that's all I can think about is mangoes. And like, yeah, in normal life, you can have an obsession about a mango. Sure. You can have a obsession about cars. You know, like I know a lot of people that are just obsessed about random things, right? And they're good things that they're obsessed about. Like I have friends that are obsessed about building a business, or, you know, mountain biking or skateboarding or whatever, right? But this specifically with OCD is an obsession around a fear of something happening. So for example, I have a friend, he's obsessed about not getting others sick. So what he'll do is after church, he'll go and he'll wipe down the seats to make sure that nobody else gets contaminated from people sitting on the seats, because maybe somebody has a virus, maybe someone has bacteria, and that bacteria or virus might spread to somebody else. And so to make sure that he didn't spread a virus or bacteria, or somebody else didn't spread that virus or bacteria, he'll go and wipe it off after church, after nobody is there later that night. So his fear is that somebody else, not himself, but somebody else will get sick. And he doesn't want to have that moral responsibility of knowing that he sat in that chair and then somebody else ends up getting sick. And that level of sickness could be a varying degree of just getting a cold to potentially death. He doesn't want to have that on his conscience. So he goes back, and to be 100% sure, he's cleaning it up, which brings us to the second point, is the compulsion. The compulsion is the thing that you do to make sure that that fear that you have doesn't come to pass. So for example, him in the situation, he goes back, cleans the chair because he doesn't want somebody else to get sick. He has to be 100% sure. And the problem is, even if he does go back and cleans that chair, it's impossible for him to know 100% that someone is not going to get sick, right? It's impossible. How would you know? You can't like put the chair under a microscope and check for the bacteria and check for the virus and see that there's no viruses. You can't like check, for example, let's say you have like your hands. Let's say you have your hands and you touch the chair. You didn't check your hands before under a microscope to see if there's bacteria or viruses. You didn't check to see if that virus was then transferred onto the chair. And let's say you did do that somehow. You didn't check afterwards that that virus was then cleaned after with a microscope. It's just not really realistic, right? Like, how would you do that in real life? It's just not going to come to pass, okay? So it's just not really happening, which is the torturous part about OCD. Is it's impossible to completely get 100% reassurance from your compulsions, even though that's what we want. We're after that complete 100% reassurance of our compulsion. We want to know for sure that that fear that we have will not come to pass. So we do everything in our power to have that fear settled, to know for sure, okay, it's not going to happen. And then the third part of OCD is the fact that it is a disorder. This is something that is not just a thought in our brain. It's not something that is just, people will say that are uneducated about OCD, just don't think about it. Or just like you need to train the way that you think, or you just need to, read a couple self-help books or talk it out in therapy. It's like you have absolutely no idea like really what OCD is if that's how you think that this thing can be solved. You've not lived it. You know how many times I've tried to like not think about OCD or not think about my obsessions, just try to take their advice or talk about it in therapy, or do the typical thing of like ask people if I'm a good person when I felt like my OCD was telling me I wasn't. And you know what that did? That only made it 100 million times worse. So don't listen to those people. You need to listen to people that are either professionally trained or people that have actually gone through it, who have the OCD, who have actually gotten the help, like me, who have really put in the work to figure out how to beat this thing, okay? So the disorder is something that it's an actual neurological issue. And we'll get into the specific causes of this quote unquote neurological issue. Now, I want to make a very distinct distinction here, okay? This does not mean you're broken, okay? It doesn't. If anything, I would argue it means the opposite for a few reasons. One, it can be solved. We can fix it to some degree, okay? It can't be completely fixed. Like, you can't fix OCD all the way. That's impossible. But what you can do is you can put in tools to really get it to a level where you can function very highly in society, which is great. So don't fear that, okay? So that's not the issue here. Number two, the level of pain that you've probably already suffered with OCD is so much more than you will suffer in any other level of life, that every other kind of pain in life, whether that be losing a job, losing a wife, going through a divorce, breaking up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, losing a family member or a pet, all of that will pale in comparison to the amount of torture that your brain has put you through with OCD. Now, to anybody on the outside, that might sound bad, but if you have OCD, you will 100% understand what I'm talking about. The amount of pain that you experience with OCD is unfathomable. I remember before I really had it come into my life, I had absolutely no idea that a human being could experience such grave levels of pain. I had absolutely no idea. It was insane to me. I remember even just talking to a few people recently, like I can't imagine if there's anything else out there that people are experiencing that is outside of OCD that can bring this much pain or even more pain. Like, the amount of sympathy now and empathy even now that I have for other people is just so much deeper. So just know that you're a stronger person. You're way stronger than the majority of people because you've experienced something that most people cannot even fathom. And that's true. They can't fathom it. They don't even understand it. They don't even understand that pain can feel that deep, that pain doesn't even encapsulate the concept itself. Like, we need a different word, really. Okay, so just know you're not broken. If anything, you're a warrior. You're going to be able to build yourself into something that's going to be far greater than you could have if you didn't have OCD. Now, to be honest, I still wish I would have never had it, right? But we have it. That's the lot we've been given in life. So now it's just time to build back better than we've been able to build before, and we're going to do it. And so let's just get into the next situation, okay? With this course, with this full guide here, I want you to understand something with OCD, okay? OCD is tricky. It's as if it has its mind outside of yourself, and you are constantly trying to be convinced by it. It's going to try to convince you that like you don't have OCD, like this time it's not OCD. It's like you're actually going to get sick, or you're actually going to get your mom sick, or your parents sick, or your girlfriend sick, or your coworker sick if you don't wash your hands this time. Like, the virus is going around this time, like this season, like the flu's super bad or whatever, right? Or you're actually guilty this time, like you really did commit that sin. You really do need to go talk to your religious leader, blah, 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 blah. Including this video. It's going to tell you, like, this video itself is wrong. Okay. Don't let that happen. Don't let OCD convince you that this video that you're watching is wrong and that it doesn't apply to you. Because most likely it does apply to you. I want you to shut your brain off at this point and just try the steps that I say in this video. Your brain has not worked at this point. That's something I had to realize. It's my brain was broken, and I had to kind of get really humble. To be honest, I had to realize, like, hey, the things I tried at this point, before, they didn't work before. And I had to like really just say, okay, like, I'll go to the therapist, I'll go to the doctors, I'll go to my friends that had OCD before. I seeked out a lot of people that had it before. I said, okay, what worked for you? I had to turn my brain off and listen to the people that really knew what they were talking about. You have to be humble, because OCD will try to take over and tell you, like, no, you don't have OCD. Let me run your mind. But you can't let yourself go there, okay? Don't let yourself go there. So let's go on to the next situation here. I want to go back so you kind of understand my situation with my OCD, how I knew I had OCD. So let's go back to 2014 when my obsessions really, started, when they took place. So 2014, I moved to New York City. So I'm originally from California, Southern California, Los Angeles area, but I moved to New York City. Now I moved to New York City. I moved to Harlem, the Bronx, Yonkers. And so I was in like the ghetto. So for those who don't know, Harlem And the Bronx, they're pretty sketchy areas. They can't be their super fun areas for sure, but they can be super sketchy if you're in the wrong places. Now, I wasn't just living there commuting to the city. I was there on like a church mission, and I was there knocking doors every day. I was in the streets. I was talking to everybody. I was involved in the community heavily, more than 99% of the people. I was in the projects every single day. Like, for example, like in Harlem, I lived on 116th and Lexington. We were knocking project doors every single day. We were in the subways. We were, everywhere. We were in the Polo Grounds, hence why I put ASAP Rocky on the screen. If you know, you know. He's from New York. He's from the Polo Grounds right over there. And the Polo Grounds, for example, are so sketchy. They built their own community down below the rest of the city in Harlem. They got like their supermarket, they got their housing, they got schools, etc., all in this little section of projects because they don't want them coming up on the rest of the island. Okay, it's a sketchy area. This is no joke. I'm telling you. If you know New York, you know. Like, there's things that happen here. Okay, so I moved to New York City. Let me just show you a couple pictures of the projects here. Okay, so projects are government housing. If you don't know, if you can't afford housing, you get government housing. But like the problem is a lot of these projects are gangs. Pretty much, a lot of gangs live here. And a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of crime happens in these buildings. I've seen a lot of things go down here. A lot of things happen to me here. Things that I don't really like to talk about. Things that I don't even think I can talk about on YouTube. But when I moved here, a lot of things happened. I experienced a lot of situations in these projects, outside of the projects, on the streets. I was here for a few years. And I experienced a lot of trauma. And next thing I know, as I was experiencing this trauma in New York City, in Harlem, Bronx, Yonkers, Inwood, which is the most upper part of Manhattan, I basically started to have OCD tendencies. There was kind of these weird situations, okay? So when I first started to have OCD, I experienced things. So for example, one of the things that happened, the very first day I got to New York, I got held up at gunpoint. And this would be kind of like the pattern of the daily situation that would happen every single day for years, that would happen every day, multiple times, right? Kind of a thing where it would just be sketchy situation after sketchy situation. And I quickly realized, like, okay, this is going to be my life for a few years. And so it was very traumatic because I came from a pretty affluent neighborhood, or, it was okay. It was a suburb. It was in California before. And I never grew up in a sketchy situation like this before. I mean, I'd been in LA before, quite often, because I grew up playing basketball, and we'd go to like Compton quite often to go play. And, I was in downtown and Long Beach, etc. But I'd never actually like lived in it and knocked the doors and was in it every single day from 6:30 till 9:30 p.m. every single day for years, like conversing with everybody, getting to know, like I was in it, right? So that situation where I got held up at gunpoint really like kind of like I was confronted with death. And I thought for a while, like I thought for sure, like I'm going to die. Like I really believed it. And so what happened is I stopped eating for months. I stopped eating for quite a while. I lost 40 pounds. I got super deathly sick. I got a super crazy rash all over my body, to the point where I remember I was so itchy. Like the rash was so bad. I would scratch. It got super swollen, but I would scratch myself so bad to the point where I was just bleeding completely from every pore. And I got really sick for months and months and months. I thought I was going to die. It was just horrible. That's when it all started. That's when the OCD got super, super bad. It kind of was weird because it wasn't like super apparent at first that it was OCD. But what I noticed started to happen is where those sketchy situations happened, I would have to go back to the very street. So for example, where I got held up at gunpoint, I would have to go back to that street and put myself in that exact situation where I was afraid. And I knew those people hung out on that block, and I would go back and I would have to know, like, okay, like I need to see those people again, and I need to survive in this situation again to make sure 100% that I can survive. So I would go back, almost like a surviving mechanism in the time is what I thought it was. And I would go back and put myself in the same situation to know that I could survive. And I did this over and over and over again, many times in many different situations. So for example, there was one time where there was, in New York City, the way that it works in a lot of these project buildings, not really the projects, it's more the apartment buildings, and they're usually kind of mixed in with the projects. They'll have a door and you have to get buzzed into that door. Then there's a second door. But the only way that you can get into the second door is if you get buzzed in, but you have to get buzzed in both, but you have to get buzzed in separately. So you go in the first door, you have to get buzzed in, you have to wait to get buzzed into the second door. So I go into the first door, right? We got buzzed into the first door. Then comes in like a whole group of people. They're all covered in black. They got these huge bags. They're doing a drug heist, but not a heist, but like a huge drug delivery. We're talking just probably kilos and kilos of drugs, just tons. And they come into the door and we're right in the middle. And they look at us and they think we're the feds. And they come up and they're like, "Are you guys the feds?" And we're like, no, we're not the feds. Like, we're good. Like, you do you. And, we get into this confrontation because they think we're the feds. We're going to bust them. And we're trapped, but they have way more guys than we do. And so it ended up being this whole sketchy situation. I don't really want to talk about it. And we get away, let's just say. We confront them. It ended up being this whole thing. We lived and it was fine eventually. Well, I wanted to go back. So I go back a few days later, have the same situation, but I live, right? Do it again, show myself I can survive. So fast forward. I mean, initially this was a nice thing because I became like really like, okay, like I can survive anything in the hood. Let's go. Like, let's do this. But that pattern transpired when I got home because eventually I moved back to California. Okay. And then I started to experience these compulsions in a different way. And they came through religiously, which was interesting because I was on a religious mission doing, the work there, but they came through religiously. And they weren't so much about like surviving in tough situations, but we'll get to that in a little bit. So what causes OCD? So there's a lot of different arguments that goes on within the OCD community about what actually causes OCD. And we can talk about some of them. So for example, the first thing is genetics. So if you have a family member that has OCD, you're more likely probably to have that in your genes. So for example, my sister has OCD. I have OCD. I think there's a correlation there to some degree. Usually I would say the most common thing is usually it's a lack of serotonin in the brain, and we'll kind of get down to that with the neurotransmitter imbalances. Just so you know, genetics kind of really are a big part of it. If you look around into your family, just see if anybody else has OCD tendencies. I know as well, like if you have ADD or ADHD, for example, like I have ADD, my mom has ADD, her brother has ADD, her sisters have ADD. So it seems to travel in the family, that does. And I know that there's some type of relation. I've done some studies on ADHD and OCD and autism and the correlation between the three. And it seems in some studies, they've done studies where the three seem to relate. I don't know why. I'm not a scientist, so I don't understand completely why, but there are some correlations between the three. Number 2 is brain structure and function. Abnormalities in the corticostriatal thalamocortical circuit. It's a big word. Just know it's a part of the brain. Overactivity in orbital frontal cortex and anterior cingulate. Okay, so that's a part of the brain. Basically what it is it's your decision-making part of your brain, and it's overactive. It's going too fast. So yeah, basically you're too smart. You know what I mean? You're too smart. Your decision-making part of your brain is going too quickly. So I guess you could say it's a good thing, but in our situation, it's probably not the best thing. Okay, so the next thing is neurotransmitter imbalances, primarily serotonin dysfunction, also dopamine and glutamate abnormalities. The main thing though is serotonin dysfunction. If you have OCD, you typically have low serotonin in the brain. For those of you who have OCD, who have family members or parents that say it's just in your head, this should come as a big relief. This means it's not you. You're not the problem. Okay, you actually have a problem that's going on, like a chemical problem in your brain. That should take some relief off of you. I know it did me. When I found out for those years that I just wasn't like bringing this upon myself, that there was an actual problem that wasn't my fault, I was able to just kind of be like, oh my goodness, finally. I don't have so much guilt on myself anymore. Just realize that we have low serotonin and we can fix that. There's natural ways we can fix it, and we can also fix that through medication. The next one is environmental triggers, so stressful life events, trauma. My move to New York City and the trauma I experienced there, or major life changes can trigger onset in genetically predisposition individuals. So for example, if you have a family member that has OCD and you maybe have not experienced it yet, if you go through a trauma or you have a major life change and you are, predispositioned to it, that trigger or that trauma can bring that OCD upon you. It can bring it out essentially. So just know that. Another one is infections. So PANDAS, pediatric autoimmune, neuropsychiatric disorders associated with streptococcal infections in some children. So that's another one is infections. PANDAS is been, argued or even proven in some cases to bring out OCD. The next one is developmental factors. So brain development during childhood and adolescence. Also, OCD tends to peak between ages 10 to 12 and 18 and 25. So for me, it peaked essentially, I would say at age 19 is when it really got bad. That's when to be fair, it came about at 19. It got terrible at 25, which is interesting. Learning and conditioning. I would say you have to kind of have OCD or tendencies for this one to really kind of be a situation. But I know for me personally, my OCD got way worse because of the learning and conditioning situation that I put it through, which is basically the reinforcement, doing the thing to relieve the anxiety. And we'll get into that cycle in a second here. So negative reinforcement cycle where compulsions temporarily reduce anxiety, strengthening the OCD pattern. So for example, I have a fear of getting my sister sick. So I wash my hands so I don't spread a virus. So what do? I wash my hands. That's the compulsion, to be 100% sure I don't get her sick. But the problem is every time I wash my hands, that's only going to feed the OCD more. You'd think it'd be the other way around, right? Like, okay, phew, I wash my hands, my anxiety's down. But the more you do it, 2 seconds later, that fear is going to come back and you're going to need to wash your hands again. And then again, and again, and again, and again. And it strengthens that OCD pattern over and over and over again. And the more you do it, the more that OCD in general will grow. And it might even spread into other types of OCD. The next one is pregnancy and hormonal changes. Postpartum period can trigger or worsen OCD symptoms. This is largely due to a lot of the hormonal changes that you go through when you are in pregnancy or after, having a baby. There's a lot of, you can read up on postpartum syndrome. So there's a lot of different causes with OCD. So key point here is OCD likely results from a combination of genetic, vulnerability, brain differences, and environmental factors, not just one single cause. So there's a lot that goes into the pot here. So I wouldn't just try to pinpoint it to one thing, just realize there's a lot of things, and that's okay that there's a lot of things. We just kind of have to figure out like what we can control and kind of like look at each of these little steps here, look at everything here and see like, okay, well, what can I do to fix, for example, like if you go back a slide here, for the neurotransmitter imbalances, what can I do to naturally increase serotonin? What can I do to increase serotonin with medication, for example? What environmental triggers am I going through? Am I going through trauma right now? What can I do to reduce trauma or major life changes? What can I do to change my brain structure? Obviously, probably not much. So that might not be something that we can change. What can I do to change my genetics? Not much, right? What can I do to change my infections with PANDAS? Not much. See, there's things that we can change. There's things that we cannot change. We need to focus on the things that we can change in order to better our symptoms so that we can thrive with OCD. Okay, so let's go to 2020. I get married. All hell breaks loose, okay? 2020 is when my OCD peaked. Now, if we go back to this slide, environmental trigger, stressful life events. I got married. Major life change. Now, I wouldn't contribute marriage itself to this, but it was definitely a part of it. Like I said, OCD is just not one thing, it's many things. I get married. OCD comes on super, super hard at this point. Now, I don't know why it does, but it does. Let me explain to you my OCD at this point. My OCD is scrupulosity. For those of you who don't know what scrupulosity is, it's a form of OCD where you are religiously obsessed with being right before God. So it's moral or religious OCD, and you constantly want to make sure that you are right before God, that you're not going to hell, and you will do absolutely anything to make sure that's essentially the case. Now, the problem with this is how do you do this? How do you know that you are 100% right before God if God is not here before you? He's an invisible being as far as we're concerned here on earth, right? We can't actually go before him like I can you, or, you can go before anybody at the store or whatever, right? You can't do that. It's impossible. So I struggled with this. And what I would do, I grew up fairly religious. Obviously, I mean, I went on a church mission, so I was religious. I grew up religious. I would create lists of things that I've done from the very point of my birth, basically. I mean, as far as I could remember when I was a little kid, everything that I've ever done wrong. And I would make lists, and I would go into my religious leaders, and I would confess everything I've ever done wrong to them. And you might think, okay, maybe that's a little bit weird, but like maybe that's kind of normal. Okay, well, here's where it gets really interesting. I would confess, but then I would go back in and I would reconfess, because I would think to myself, what if I forgot something about what I said? And I would give him more detail about that thing. So it could be anything, really. It could be anything. It could be something super small. It could be, I ran a red light, or I threw trash in the recycle. Like something super simple as this, right? Like nothing crazy. It could be something bigger too. Nothing, not like, crazy, but like it could be something bigger as well. Like something that the church would maybe consider a sin, right? A bigger sin. But for the most part, like maybe it wasn't, right? I would have to go through and I would have to reconfess, and I would go back and think, oh, well, maybe I forgot more detail. And so I would give more detail. And I just started to make these lists, and I just realized these lists would never end, because I always realized, like, especially with someone with an OCD mind, like we can come up with more detail for basically the end of time. I soon realized it was kind of impossible to confess everything, because you can always come up with more detail. So I would go back in day after day after day, confess, to the point where I would even make up details. I would over confess. I'd be like, you know what? I didn't do that thing, but like, I'm just going to say I did that thing just to make sure, like 100%, there's the compulsion, just to make sure 100%, like I can just say like, oh, I'm covered, like before God, like my religious leader will know, like I 100% like am like repentant, because like I 100% confessed even more than like what I did, just in case, like, so like I would confess things that I didn't even do, which is insane. Right? That sounds like insanity to me at this point. And it was. And so the problem is it wasn't just a mental thing at this point. What happened is like it got to the point where I was throwing up every day, like 5 times. I had acid reflux because I felt so guilty about the things that I'd done, even if they were so simple. Like, for example, like I would go and I would throw trash in the recycle bin, and for some reason this turned into like a moral situation where I had to go find that piece of recycle and go take it out of the trash and put it back into the recycle. But the problem is impossible, because the trash guy already took the trash away, and that recycle is now in the trash at the dump, and it'd be impossible. So I'm sitting with this guilt that's impossible to quell. It's impossible. So I put it on my list and I confessed to my religious leader. But part of repentance is restitution, which is basically fixing the problem that you've done. But how do you fix a problem that's impossible to fix? You can't fix that, right? So things like this, and I've realized on my list, like most of the things that I put on my list, it's impossible to completely fix. No, I understand with Christianity and religious things, like the whole point is to have God, and God basically takes away that part you can't fix. But I didn't quite understand this at the time, or I didn't care, because it wasn't a matter of logic. It was a matter of OCD. So I was throwing up 5 times a day. I was super, super just sad, depressed, sick. I couldn't work. I couldn't function. I couldn't function in my marriage. I was just absolutely at the lowest point of my life. I couldn't see an escape. My poor religious leaders didn't know what to do with me. Hats off to them. And not only this, but like my OCD started to spread in other ways. It started to go in order OCD. I had to keep things very orderly and clean. It started to go in harm OCD. I was now afraid to touch my dog, touch my wife, touch my mom, give them hugs, pet my dog, because I was afraid that like I had the potential to hurt them. Not that I ever would, because I'm a very loving guy, and I would never do that. That's not the point. I just had this fear, this immense fear, that because I was a bigger guy and I had the potential to do it, that like, what if I touched them too hard? Or what if I pet my dog too hard? Or what if I snapped one day and I pet the dog too hard, or I hurt the dog on purpose, or whatever, like it was just this unrealistic fear. But because I had this fear, I refused to touch the dog. I refused to pet the dog. These things that really made the relationship suffer, I refused to do because I was so afraid of potentially hurting them. Harm OCD is what this is called, if you wanted to know. maybe you have it yourself. I'm sorry if you do. It's not fun. Anyway, so I had these debilitating things. And so I go to the doctor. I'm going into getting an endoscopy. For those who don't know what that is, it's where they stick a camera down your esophagus, down your throat, down your esophagus into your stomach. And they're looking and seeing like what's going on in your esophagus. And you know, the doctor told me, because he saw that I was having a bunch of holes being burned into my esophagus. And he told me, he's like, listen, if you don't fix whatever you got going on, you have a bunch of holes being burned in your esophagus and your stomach, you're going to get cancer and you're going to be dead. Which just added more stress to the whole situation. And I dealt with this for, at this point, it may have been a year, 9 months straight of this, just pure hell and torture. And at this point, I wanted to end everything. I wanted to just leave Earth, if you know what I mean. I can't see it on YouTube, but I wanted to self-delete. I wanted to get out of here. I wanted to just, I couldn't take it anymore. The amount of pain that was in my mind that was going on, even physically with this stomach issues that was going on, I couldn't take it anymore. And so I realized at this moment, I'm like, I got two options. I can either absolutely try every single modality that exists on Earth to figure this out, or I can end everything. And so I said to myself, okay, well, I'm going to try absolutely everything first. And then if that doesn't work, I'll end everything. And luckily stuff worked. So hence why I'm here, which leads me to medication. Okay. So I went in, I met with my primary care physician. Not only that, I got therapy as well. There's a specific type of therapy that you're going to want to get with OCD, not talk therapy. Okay. Because that's actually going to make OCD a lot worse. But I got medication, I got therapy, and I almost gave up. That's 2020. 2020 was an absolutely terrible year. And yeah, we had other reasons 2020 was terrible that I can't say on YouTube. But that really, for me, that was the least of my worries, okay? 2021 through 2023 was terrible as well, but it was a combination of a lot of different things that led to my recovery. It was an intense 2 to 3 years, really kind of spanned all the way into 2024, but it was a combination of medication, ERP therapy, which we'll get into, meeting with various doctors, trying other modalities, toxic heavy metal detox, which is controversial because it's not proven by science, ketamine treatment, group therapy, and solo ERP therapy. Okay. So I tried everything because I told myself, if I didn't figure it out, no more Austin, because it was that painful. But I also was somebody that didn't give up. That's why I tried this. I went super hard in this because I knew there was no other option. Because the amount of pain that I was experiencing, I didn't really know how to function. I couldn't function. It was just too much. It was, if you're watching this video, you most likely understand. Okay. So this leads us to our next topic, which is types of OCD. Now, if you have OCD, I want you to kind of look at this and see if you can identify with the type of OCD that you have. Maybe you have one. Maybe you have two, maybe you have three, maybe you have four, maybe you have five. Maybe you don't have any and you're just watching this for a brother or sister or whatever, or maybe you're a mom or a dad and your son or daughter has OCD and you want to understand them better. Try to recognize what kind of OCD you have or what kind of OCD the person that you are watching this for has, okay? Let's go into this. Types of OCD. So first thing you need to know is there's lots of different types of OCD. It's not limited to what I have on this list. In fact, there's new types of OCD that OCD can make up itself. OCD is very smart. It can make up new ways to kind of infect itself into your brain and into your life. So just be aware. Although you might solve one way of OCD, it might kind of creep in a different way. That's happened with me. When I figured out how to beat scrupulosity, next thing I knew, just right OCD popped up. Harm OCD popped up. Just because I have some of the most common on here doesn't mean that this is kind of all of them. There's a lot of different ones. So just understand that, okay? I just kind of wanted to get just a basic idea out there of the different types, okay? First one, contamination OCD. What is it? Fear of germs, dirt, chemicals, which leads to excessive cleaning, and you avoid things that are dirty or things that would, you consider contaminated. That could be objects, places, things, people. It could be car doors. It could be shoes. It could be cutting boards. It could be counters. It could be, tables that are in public places. It could be really anything that could be contaminated to any degree. So you avoid them because you're afraid of the germs, of whether that be getting you sick, getting others sick from those germs. The next one is checking OCD. So repeatedly checking things like locks, appliances, or switches due to fear that something terrible will happen if not verified. So for example, my sister who has OCD, We used to have a bird. His name was Frank. And she used to have to check his cage every time that we left the house. And we'd have to go back and check like 4 times to see if this guy's cage was was locked. Even though that she knew. And so, or it could be checking the stove, right? Checking if the stove is off. Even though, you'd left the house 3 times already and had to come back and check if the stove was locked or the stove was off and you already knew that it was off, or checking if the door is locked. You have to check over and over and over again, or checking the fact there was this one person, I think we talked about it in the video already, checking if you ran over ran over somebody, right? Having to go back and look. Or there was this one person that I knew of, they had to check if their body was on their head. And the only way that they could do this is if they had a mirror. They had to carry a mirror with them. Think of the torture of this. They had to carry a mirror with them and check to see if their body was on their head. I can't even imagine the torture that had to be. Over and over and over, because they just didn't believe it. Even though they logically knew that they had eyes, and the only place that the eyes reside are in the head, they had to actually check with the mirror every single 5 minutes if their head was on their head, or on their body, sorry. Next one is symmetry or ordering OCD. So needs for objects to be arranged in a specific, symmetrical, or just right way to reduce anxiety. I've experienced this OCD. This could be anything for like for example, sometimes my mom will have food on her face. She'll probably laugh if she sees this. And like, I can't focus on what she's talking or what she's saying to me unless like she wipes that thing off of her face. It's got to be just right. Like, it's got to be like, I just can't focus. I'm sorry. I just can't. I've not been able to in the past. Like, it's hard. Or it could be like having your room cleaned in just the perfect way, or having like the table just perfectly symmetrical within the room. Having like the angles just right. Like the distance between one wall to the table compared to the other wall has to be just right. And you would go even so far as maybe even measuring with a tape measure, having like the distance from one wall to the table to the other wall compared to the back wall to the front wall of, everything being exactly symmetrical. That can happen. And you will experience this extreme level of anxiety if it's not that way. I've experienced this. It's not fun, okay? That can be a definite state of torture if it's not done exactly how you need, things being extreme order. The next one is harm OCD. Kind of touched on this a little bit with my dog and being afraid to pet her. Basically what it is it's intrusive thoughts about accidentally or intentionally harming oneself or others, leading to avoidance behaviors. So not petting the dog, for example, or not, for example, if you're afraid of hurting yourself or others, maybe you don't cook with a knife. So maybe you cook with canned food instead of coming into the kitchen and actually like chopping up food to cook and throwing it into a pan. You avoid ever picking up a knife because you don't want to potentially have this idea where maybe you could use the knife to hurt others. The next one is religious or moral OCD. My plague in my life, I guess you could say. Scrupulosity, excessive concern about sinning, being immoral, or not following religious practices perfectly. By the way, Martin Luther had scrupulosity. And I'm going to do a full scrupulosity guide as well, where we'll go more in detail into that. It's pretty interesting, actually. And it actually had to do a large part as to why he started the Lutheran Church. Okay. Next one is purely obsessional. This one's kind of interesting. Primarily mental compulsions like ruminating, mental checking, or thought neutralization without obvious physical rituals. So this one's a little bit less obvious because it's not necessarily an outward compulsion. It could be like thinking if you're in the right job and constantly having to compare with previous jobs. Like, well, did I fit better with my boss in the past job? Like, should I have left that job? Did I make more money? Like, was it better that I lived in this other apartment? And you're constantly trying to compare to a level where you're trying to constantly relieve your anxiety of your current state. It could be like that, for example. I mean, there's a lot of different situations, right, where this could apply. It's a little bit more elusive, so it's harder to identify. Okay. The next one is health anxiety OCD. Obsessive worry about having serious illnesses leading to excessive body checking and medical reassurance seeking. So this, for example, is the not understanding if your head is on your body, or constantly getting reassurance if you're having some type of illness through medical practitioners, or, maybe you're afraid you have cancer. So you're constantly checking, getting medical tests done, some type of disease or a virus or whatever. The next one is existential OCD. Overwhelming preoccupation with philosophical questions about life, death, reality, or the meaning of existence. Magical thinking OCD, belief that certain thoughts, words, or actions can cause or prevent bad thoughts or events from happening to oneself or loved ones. So for example, I had this when I was young. I used to think if I stepped, so for example, in my house, my parents have a driveway, and on the driveway, they're like these like little stones. And in the stones, like they have like little cracks around the stones. And when I was a kid, I used to think, this was the first moment I realized I kind of had OCD. I didn't realize it then, but like now looking back, I realized like, obviously this is like OCD tendencies, but like I would used to think like, if I step on the cracks, my parents are going to die. So I used to not step on the cracks. And whenever I stepped on the cracks, I used to think like, I now need to say a prayer and ask God to bless my parents that they won't die. Otherwise, you're going to die. So I used to do that. Every time I stepped in the cracks, I would quickly say a prayer in my mind to make sure that my parents never died. And so hence, perfect example, magical thinking OCD. Okay, so does it matter what type of OCD that I have? The short answer is no, it does not. Not really. Sort of yes, because it's going to kind of change the way that you treat it as far as what kind of therapy or like the actual way that you do therapy changes, but the type of therapy you do does not change. So no, not really. It doesn't really matter. Here is how to treat OCD. First is therapy, but not the typical therapy that you think. Most people think it's talk therapy. No, wrong. Talk therapy, and this is where I messed up in the beginning. I thought people were like, oh, we'll go to therapy for your OCD. Okay, well, I'll go to talk therapy. Well, I was lucky because my therapist, she's an amazing woman. And she actually put me on to like medication. And she's like, you have low serotonin in the brain. That's what OCD is. And you need help with that. So you need to get on therapy. So go to your general practitioner, your MD, and get on get on some medication. He put me on to a psychiatrist, and then he put me on to a OCD therapist. I was in talk therapy for a little bit, but I quickly realized like talk therapy is not the thing, because what it did is it just made my compulsion stronger. Because I would go to her and I'd be like, well, do you think I'm a good person? I did this, because I had scrupulosity at the time. So I was going through my list and I'd be like, I did this and this and this and this. Do you think I need to go talk to my religious leader? Like, do you think I did all these things? Like I made this list this time and I made this list, the next time. And she'd be like, well, I think you're a good person. I think you did this. And it was just kind of reinforcing like the OCD, and it made it worse. And I did the same thing with my parents. I did the same thing with my friends, etc. Right? And it just kind of made it worse. The kind of therapy that we do want, and I would suggest going to a specific obsessive compulsive disorder therapist, because they treat this differently. The kind of therapy we want is not talk therapy. It's ERP therapy, and that stands for exposure response prevention therapy. Okay. That is what we want. And I'm going to get into what it is. The second way to treat OCD is with medication. Now, there's an argument. Do you need medication? Can I just do ERP therapy? Or even the other way around. Do I need to do ERP therapy if I do medication? I would say it depends on how bad your OCD is. My OCD was so bad that ERP couldn't even work until I was on medication. I had to do both. In fact, I had to do medication first before ERP would even begin to work, which was an interesting situation. Okay. Some people though can just get on it on ERP. And in fact, I would start with ERP today, because you can start today. Medication, you can't start today because you have to go to the doctor. You have to wait a long time. You have to wait for the meds to work. But you can start ERP today because you can go to the bookstore. You can get a book on ERP. You can look up on YouTube ERP. You can, there's ways to start today. Just start. Okay. Because the quicker you start, the quicker we can actually begin to heal. Ideally, you wouldn't have to go on meds, but a lot of the time we need the meds. And sometimes you have to be on them for a year or 2 years, sometimes maybe life. Sometimes though, you don't have to be on them forever, which is okay. We just want to get you in a spot where you can start to like see life differently. Like one of the things that meds really did for me was like, I was able to see what life was like as somebody that didn't experience OCD. So once I had that kind of like that dichotomy, that perspective change, I was able to kind of realize like, oh, OCD is like that, and Austin and normal brain is like this. So once I had that kind of that difference, that ability to compare, I was able to see life differently. And then when I was able to kind of like look at life a little bit differently and see a situation that popped up that was OCD, I was able to kind of just like see like, okay, that's OCD. That's Austin. I'm going to disregard that thing, and I'm not going to let that thing bother me. And I was able to kind of like have that be a large part of my treatment. So the medications gave me this new perspective that I just didn't have before. So in a large way, the medications really did help. And I've always been in my life, I've always been anti-medication. I went on medication for like a teeny period of time for ADD, and I hated it. It was not good. I went on like Strattera and Ritalin, and I think that was it. But it was a short period of time, but I just absolutely just didn't like it. And I went off it, and I was totally against it. I'm like, nah, forget this. But like, I was completely against medication my entire life. But like, this was so necessary because I was going to just end everything, right? So like, I needed it at this time, went on the medication, and it really, really, really helped. I couldn't have done it without it, to be completely honest. I couldn't have really been in a spot mentally where I could have done the exposures. Okay, so let's get into this here. What is ERP? So ERP stands for Exposure and Response Prevention, and it is the gold standard treatment for OCD that involves intentionally exposing yourself to your obsessive fears while then resisting the urge to perform the compulsions. How does this work exactly? Okay, so let's take my scrupulosity example. My fear was what? Not being right before God or going to hell because I did something wrong. So let's say I did something wrong. Let's just say I cursed at somebody at the grocery store. Let's just say that was my thing. Like I called somebody the F word or something, right? And and I cursed at them, and I was like feeling super bad, and I felt like I was going to hell because I was, not following like God. And so I write it down on my paper, and I'm like, I need to go talk to my religious leader because like I need to know for sure that I'm forgiven. And I can't really know for sure I'm forgiven in front of God because like God's not here. So how is he going to tell me? I want to know for sure. So I write it down, and normally I would go talk to my religious leader. In this case, it'd be a bishop. So I would go talk to the bishop, right? The exposure would be what? The exposure would be the cursing. Now, in this situation, you wouldn't really want to go and curse at somebody at the grocery store because that would just be super rude, right? Like you would be kind of a jerk. You don't want to do that. Well, what can we do that's similar, that would elicit a similar moral or religious response of guilt? Now, it could have been anything for me in this situation. So it didn't have to be cursing. It could be anything really. I yelled at my dog, and because I was mean to the dog, I said, "Hey, get over here." Let's say, or I had a bad thought or something, right? Like I had a bad thought about a woman. Like I thought she was like really cute or something. And I had like a sexual thought, let's say. And like usually like I'd write that thought down, and I would have to confess the thought exactly. Like I had this sexual thought about a woman, and I'd have to write the thought down and go in and confess that to my bishop, right? What I would do now is I would explicitly think to myself that thought, and I would write the thought down on a piece of paper. And then normally what I would do is like, okay, crap, I just had that thought. I need to go confess it to my bishop. Well, the response would be the confession part to the bishop. So now though is the prevention of that response. So instead of confessing that part to the bishop, what I would do is not go to the bishop and not confess that to the bishop. I would not confess that sexual thought about that woman that I had, or not yelling at the dog, right? I wouldn't confess that, or not yelling at, the F word to the person at the grocery store, if that's what actually happened. Because that's another thing, is real event OCD are things that actually happened in real life that you did, that you can't stop ruminating on, that really aren't that big of a deal. Like if you curse at somebody in the grocery store, okay, just don't do it again, right? Like, why do you need to go confess to your religious leader? Well, if you have OCD, you know, like it's not going to leave you alone. But that is the prevention part, is like, don't let yourself go. Confess. Now, the problem is this is going to cause a ton of anxiety, way more anxiety than you've ever experienced with OCD. And you're going to probably give in a bunch. I did a lot. This is kind of where it's really good to have like a therapist there working with you, because they're going to be able to tell you and guide you through like listen, like your anxiety is going to spike for this amount of time. It's kind of like when you're in the gym, right? Like if you're on a fitness program and you hire like a trainer, like the trainer, someone who's gotten in shape before, knows how long it takes to lose weight. They know like you're going to be in a caloric deficit for this amount of time, and you're going to feel like crap for this amount of time. And you're going to feel hungry for 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and you're going to need to drop your calories like 200 calories because your metabolism is going to slow down once you hit week 8. You're going to need to drop 200 calories. And like they're going to walk you through the process because they've done it. They've walked their clients through it many times. So they know the timeline. So it's really helpful to walk through with somebody that's been able to help with, other people do it. Initially, the anxiety will spike super high and then it'll go down. You'll soon come to realize that fear that you had was really not that scary to begin with. And as you kind of realize this, like the OCD loses its power, which is really an amazing thing. Okay. And I started to do this with the confessions. I went in and I told my bishop, I'm like, listen, I've been in here before, obviously a bajillion times. I'm working with my OCD therapist. In fact, it was my bishop that came to me and said, hey, Austin, like, I think you have the first bishop, because there was a couple. The first one told me, hey, I think you kind of have OCD tendencies. And I was like, interesting. I think maybe you're right. And I just kind of left it at that. The second one came to me and said, after a while, he's like, I've been doing some research. I think you have something called scrupulosity. And I went and I looked at it that day and I was mind blown. And I was like, this is me 100%. And it completely like helped me. That's how I was able to even kind of figure out I had this disease to begin with and got treatment. But going back to ERP, I told my bishop, I was like, listen, I can't come see you. I'm working with a therapist. He told me I can't come see you no matter how much I want to come see you. Like, I can't come in and confess. If you want to come in, if you want me to come meet with you or whatever, and you want to ask questions, then that's totally fine. And you want to like, meet with me, that's good. But I can't come in on my own accord. I just can't do it right now. And it was because I did that, because I said that, because I didn't do that, is because a large reason as to why I was able to recover with scrupulosity is because I did not go in. And I had to sit with those notes. I had to throw away those notes over and over and over again. And it was painful, but I did it over and over and over and over. And there'd be these periods of weeks where I was just guilty. I felt so guilty. I just wanted to go in so bad. And it was way worse than going in and confessing and then feeling good for a little bit. But what I noticed is the power of the OCD went away over time. It went away. Like, because initially what happens is I'd go in and confess, and then it goes away for like a little bit, but then the guilt comes back stronger. And then you go in and confess, and it comes back even stronger. And you're like, how do I escape this? And you realize you can't. And that's the problem. It just comes back stronger and stronger and stronger. It's like it's like Pinocchio with his nose. Like every time he lies, it just gets a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger. And there's just every lie he tells to cover up the next lie makes his nose bigger and bigger and bigger. And like next thing you know, there's no way for his nose to like ever go back to normal size. It was kind of a similar analogy. Sit with the response prevention. Prevent that response with all of your might. And as you do it, with time, it goes down. Let's look at a couple examples, okay? So I have a friend who was deathly afraid of alcohol. He also was religious, okay? So he was religious, grew up like, no alcohol is what it was. He not only was he religious where they didn't believe in drinking alcohol, he also was afraid of contamination. So he went to this therapy. It was like this therapy camp where they made him specifically, they got a big, huge barrel of wine and grapes. And they made him stomp on these grapes to make wine. Two of his biggest fears, contamination, getting all those grapes on his feet. Some of you are probably like, oh, that's disgusting, right? Like, I get it. And then alcohol. And he had to step on these grapes, and they mixed it with alcohol. And he had to do this for his exposures. He was being exposed to his greatest fear. And his response prevention part was not going and seeing his religious leader. And he had to sit there in this camp for weeks doing this. And I remember talking to him. By the end of it, he said that his fear had gone down and he was okay with doing it by the end of it. But at the beginning, it was just the most intense fear he'd ever felt in his entire life. You just have to figure out where OCD will attack you. So for example, if it's cleaning your hands because you're afraid that you're going to get your mom sick, well, maybe you put your hands in dirt, sit them there for 20 seconds, sit them there for 30 seconds, put your hands up, look at them, put your hands in the dishes. You know what I mean? Realize that you're not going to die. That's the life that you have to live for a while. Sit there, expose yourself to it. Don't wash your hands. Okay. Next example, my scrupulosity example. You go to confession. You confess your list. You make a list of everything you've done wrong. Well, this time you make your list, but you throw it away and you don't go to confession. You're preventing the compulsion, the thing that relieves the anxiety, because that is what makes OCD grow more. So you can just take whatever type of OCD you have and put it into this format of the exposure. Expose yourself to the thing you're afraid of, the response prevention, whatever it is that you do to relieve the anxiety. Don't do that thing. In fact, do the opposite or do nothing. So for example, if it's order OCD, you need to have your room super clean in order and you can't function without it, throw all of your laundry on the floor and make it really messy and sit down and just sit there for 10 minutes and like expose yourself to that. And it's going to be super frustrating and you're going to go crazy. But like at the end of the 10 minutes, you'll be sitting there and you'll be like, oh, I'm still here. Everything's okay. You know, like you'll be okay at the end of this and you'll kind of realize it with time, like, oh, okay, like I'm surviving. It's okay. But it might not feel like this now. In fact, I know for sure 100% you're freaking out right now, you know, about this whole situation. But that's how you beat this thing. It's backwards. It makes absolutely no sense. It doesn't make sense at all. But you have to expose yourself to the thing you're afraid of. It's kind of like jumping out of an airplane. It's like a lot of people say the worst part about jumping out of an airplane is the part before where you get up in the airplane, you put the parachute on, you're strapped in, you're like totally freaked out. And then it's like the second you jump out of the airplane is when the anxiety goes away. It's like the same thing too. I remember when I was a kid, like learning how to skateboard and you pull up to the skate park and like, you know how like, I don't know if you're familiar with skateboarding, but like, you know, when you drop in, it's like, you know, like I don't know if you've ever seen like the X Games, how they have like a vert ramp where it's like a U shape like this. And then like on the end, like the skateboarders, like they'll drop in is what they call it, where they drop in like this. Well, they put the skateboard on the end and then they drop in, you know. Well, that's very scary because what will happen is a lot of people, like when they first start out, they'll kind of half drop in it and then they'll bottom out like this and they'll fall back and then they'll hit their head and then the board goes out like that and it's like really scary. But I remember when I first like went to go do this, to drop in, I was so scared because like it was super high up and you have to fully commit. And I just stood there for like 20 minutes, totally freaked out, not being able to do it. I had like people, you know, trying to provide like, okay, Austin, like you can do it. And you know, the second I did it, the anxiety went away. I crashed and I hit my head and it was, you know, not the best situation. But the second I did it, it was so much easier to get back up there and do it again. And next thing I know, after the first 2 times that were really hard, the third time was easier, the fourth time was easier, fifth time was easier. By the end of the day, I was doing it. You know, so that's kind of how it is with OCD. You have to expose yourself to the fear. And the more you expose yourself to the fear, the easier it gets to handle. And the more easier it gets to handle, the less power that it has over you. And you realize that it really was never that big of a deal to begin with. It was to you, but it loses that power over you, which is really a freeing thing, as you'll see in your life as you practice this. Okay. So let's talk about medication. I just want to give a disclaimer here. I am not a doctor. I am somebody that has experienced OCD. This is what I would do if I was in your situation. This is what I did when I was in your situation. So go to your doctor, go to your MD, ask what you should do. Don't listen to me. Go ask what you should do, especially when it comes to the medication situation, when it comes to dosages, when it comes to the types of medication. Go ask them. So when it comes to the types of medication to treat OCD, the most common types of OCD medication are SSRIs. These are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. How do these work exactly? We're not going to get into the great detail of this, but basically what happens is with OCD, you have low serotonin in the brain. What these do in the brain is usually what your brain does is it gets rid of the excess serotonin. This makes it so your brain is not allowed to do that. It keeps the serotonin that it would get rid of. Your body doesn't directly, or your brain doesn't directly make, like you can't like take serotonin. You know what I'm saying? You can't like take a pill and then you have more serotonin. It just makes it so it doesn't get rid of the serotonin that you already have and it builds up over time. And because you have more serotonin now in your brain, it can function at a higher level and then the OCD symptoms go down. Okay, so some of the most common ones are Prozac or Zoloft, which are, you know, fluoxetine or sertraline are their you know, off-brand names. Usually, so just so you know as well, this is kind of a confusing thing with medication. Usually you have a brand name and then you have like the off-brand name, which is like the company name. So for example, sertraline is like the drug class, or not the class, but it's the drug class is the SSRIs, but it's the drug name. Sertraline is a drug name, but the brand is like the company. The brand, they make the drug and then they put their name of like their version of sertraline. So for example, the most common version of sertraline is Zoloft, or the most common version of fluoxetine is Prozac. Okay. So just know that so it's kind of confusing when you go to to get your medication, you go to the pharmacy and you see like these like really long names. You're like, I went to the doctor and he prescribed me Zoloft, but why does it say sertraline? That's why. Okay. The next one is tricyclic antidepressants, primarily clopramine. So this one is kind of interesting. This is an older medication that was approved, from the FDA for OCD. A lot of doctors don't use this to treat OCD anymore, but it was approved, and some doctors will. But it's not really that common anymore. What most doctors do now is mainly SSRIs. Sometimes what they will do is an atypical antipsychotic. This is a little bit interesting. Usually what they'll do is they'll treat this with an SSRI. I had this one time. They'll do this to augment the SSRI, to augment the serotonin in your brain. Some of these include like risperidone. I took that to augment, I believe it was fluoxetine, so Prozac at the time. I took a very small dose. And what that did was it basically made it so even more serotonin was being, was kept in my brain at that time. And that really did help at the time. So those are typically, used to treat like basically psychotic disorders. The main proponent to this is to augment the serotonin in the brain. The next one is SNRIs, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, sometimes used off-label. Okay, so those are the third one. Sometimes I never personally went on this. The next one is benzodiazepines. These are just kind of more of a short-term alternative. But for example, if you are experiencing a heavy anxiety attack, okay, but this is not an actual treatment to have for long term. This is just like if you're having a crazy anxiety attack and you need something like really short term to bring yourself back to earth, Let's talk common SSRIs for OCD and treatment dosages. So the first one is fluoxetine, Prozac. I've been on this one, sertraline, Zoloft. Okay, let's talk about those two first. So the big thing with these medications is a lot of doctors will want to prescribe you the depression dosages because these medications typically are prescribed for depression and anxiety first. Now, usually the dosages for depression are quite low. They're on the low end. Now, in order to actually affect and touch OCD, we need to be on the high end. And I would even argue, and I've read this in a lot of books, the doctors say the highest possible dosage. So for Prozac, for me, I was taking 80 milligrams a day, which is the highest dose you could possibly do. For Zoloft, I was taking 200 milligrams a day, which was at the time the highest dosage you could do. They started me off though at a low dose and nothing was happening for a long time. And it was just like, oh my goodness, what's going on? Then I read in my book, I was like, oh, this doctor here says I need to take 200 milligrams per day. So I went back to my doctor and said, hey, look, they're saying here, this doctor here in this book is saying I need to take the highest dose. And so they're like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, let me do some research. They did some research and they're like, yeah, you're right. Let's up the dosage. And we upped it and then started to work. So you need to be very careful. Talk to your doctor about this, but your OCD won't be touched unless you're on a higher dosage of the medication. So some of the other ones are Luvox, Paxil, Lexapro. And you can see here, I put the dosages. So for depression, usually for Luvox, it's 50 to 100 milligrams a day. OCD is 200 to 300 milligrams. Paxil, the depression dosage is 20 to 40 milligrams. OCD is 40 to 60 milligrams a day. Lexapro is 10 to 20 milligrams. For OCD, it's 20 milligrams. For Prozac, for depression, it's usually 20 to 40 milligrams. OCD is 40 to 60. I was up at 80. For sertraline or Zoloft, it's the depression usual dosage is 50 to 100. Sometimes it's actually 10 to 20. That's what they prescribed me at first. For OCD, it's 200 usually milligrams is the highest. Sometimes they go up if you really need it, but usually it's 20. So just so you know as well, OCD medications tend to take a while. Okay, we'll get into this, but be patient with your medication, okay? Also, if medications don't work, go through this checklist, okay? So verify adequate dosage and duration. Maximum OCD dose for 10 to 12 weeks. Think about that. Ask yourself this, okay? So first of all, are you on the max dose for OCD? That's the first thing. The second thing is this. It's not like an Advil or like even like a benzodiazepine, which is like a Xanax. Like if you're having like a mental breakdown or like a panic attack, you take a Xanax and you feel better within like 15 minutes, or you take an Advil and you feel your headache going away within 15 minutes. It takes 4 months usually, at least 4 months for you to feel better, to start to feel better on OCD medication. Okay, 4 months. Now, I know for a lot of you that can feel like super depressing. And I know for me, it was super depressing. 4 months. Are you kidding me? 4 months. Yes, 4 months, unfortunately. That's why I would suggest starting with ERP, exposure response prevention therapy, as soon as possible so that you don't have to wait for any type of relief. 4 months is a hard time to wait. It's a long time to wait too. But once you start to relieve the symptoms with the 4 months of treatment of medication, your life will change. So just be patient. Don't give up on the medication because you don't feel anything within a month or two. It's going to take a long time, but like, we're thinking long term here. We want you to live in general, okay? But then like beyond that, we want you to, have decades of life down the road. So 4 months is nothing compared to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, okay? So just think long term here. Also, step 2 is to check your medication adherence. Are you taking consistently? Are you taking it consistently without missing your dosages? Are you taking whatever your doctor prescribed you? Are you taking it according to the label? Hopefully so. Next step, if that's not working and you've done this for a long time and you're talking to your doctor and you're doing everything that they're saying, are you, maybe consider augmenting it with a atypical antipsychotic? That's what I did for a period of time, and that helped. Another thing that I had to do is I had to switch SSRIs. So I switched from Zoloft to Prozac because there was a period of time where the Zoloft stopped working, and that was not good. And my OCD came back really heavily, and then I switched to Prozac and it went away. I also had a rash from the Zoloft for a while. The Zoloft worked great for a couple of years, and then it stopped working, and I had to switch to Prozac. Maybe switch SSRIs. Maybe switch to clopramine. Maybe switch to an SNRI. Maybe you're going to have to try different, various types of medications, but that's something you need to discuss with your doctor, with your psychiatrist, with your MD, with your primary doctor as well. Whoever you're seeing, that's a actual licensed, practicing doctor. Next thing is to add ERP therapy. Are you just doing medication? Because that's not going to really work, because that's just putting a Band-Aid on everything. You need to actually do ERP therapy. You need to actually do the exposures, because here's the thing: the second you're done with the medication, your OCD is going to come right back if you're not actually doing the therapy. You need to couple them together. If you're going to do the medication route, you need to do the ERPs as well. That's like, you can do life without medication, like maybe, but you can't do it without ERP. You have to do ERP. That's like the non-negotiable. You have to do it no matter what. So are you doing it alongside medication? And not only that, but how long are you doing it a day? There was periods of time where I was doing it for 4 hours a day, with a therapist and on my own. I got every single OCD book I could possibly find. I was reading it. I was studying it. I was doing workbooks. I was going to group therapy. I hit up my county. I was going to the group discussions that they had there. I was doing like everything I could possibly do to beat this thing. Okay. Initial improvement is 6 to 8 weeks. So yeah, basically like 2 months. Full benefits, significant reduction is 10 to 12 weeks of consistent treatment. Full benefits may take 3 to 6 months. So yeah, so 4 months is when I started to notice things really starting to change. 4 months is when, yeah, 6 months is when it really starts to hit though. Like if you really want to like actually start to see like things progressing. So you're going to have to be very patient, a lot longer than for depression. Don't discontinue prematurely because you're not seeing results. You have to be patient. It's just like the same thing with getting in shape. Like most people quit because they don't want to go to the gym every day for a year. It takes a long time to get in shape. They don't want to count their calories for 6 months to a year. Who really wants to do that? And who does that really? Like not many people, but like you got to want this bad enough. If you really want to get better, you have to want this bad enough. And that's why I got better, is because my alternative was not being here anymore on earth. So I wanted it bad enough. Okay. So be patient. Okay. So alternative treatment options when meds and ERP don't work. I've experimented with some of these, and some of these did work, and these are controversial, and these are something you should probably talk to your doctor about and your parents if you're underage, for sure. Obviously, if you're underage, yeah, absolutely talk to your parents about all of these. But the first one is ketamine therapy. So it's an FDA approved nasal spray. That's one of the ways. And there's also an IV ketamine therapy, which is basically a drip that is showing promise to treatment resistant OCD. They also have these little pouches now that you can put under your tongue or in the side of your mouth or up inside of your gum. And you basically sit it there and it dissolves into your bloodstream. And it is ketamine. It is a very low dose of ketamine. There's basically a few ways to do the ketamine treatment. In fact, there's a great podcast from Andrew Huberman. He talks about ketamine treatment and specifically regarding the treatment of OCD. He talks about the different modalities in that regard. And I have done ketamine treatment. I did a very low dose of ketamine treatment, and he talks about the differences between the low dose versus the high dose. And there's been studies where the low dose is maybe sometimes even more effective than the high dose. I have a friend who's done the high dose, and she has seen some pretty significant results with that. I chose to go the low dose route, and it helped quite a bit. It gave me this perspective that I didn't have. It's known to unlock kind of this area of the brain where OCD seems to lock itself, where you can't seem to see or feel or understand things differently. That's kind of the best way I can describe it. It's kind of hard to describe. It's kind of a very elusive idea, the way that ketamine seems to unlock the brain, but I remember just experiencing it. It's not really a high feeling like you would think. It's more of just like a switch, kind of being like, your brain opens up a little bit more than maybe you would be able to open it up by itself. And there's neural pathways that are being opened up. And that is why also doctors are a little bit hesitant to recommend this treatment, because it can reroute the way that the brain is wired if done incorrectly, which is why it should be done through a practitioner, a medical practitioner, someone that's actually licensed to do this. If the meds aren't working, if the ERP is not working, this is a viable option to go down. I've done this. It worked for me. It was great. It really helped when I was having a hard time not progressing and I was doing the other options and I was in a very dark place. The next one is deep brain stimulation. This is extremely controversial because it is extremely invasive. It's basically a surgical implantation of electrodes that you have surgery for, and they put it into your brain. And it's for extreme resistant cases of OCD. I would recommend against this. I would highly recommend against this, to be honest, unless you've absolutely exhausted every single modality. You've been to every doctor you possibly could go to. You've experienced every kind of med. You've gone to every kind of therapist that you could possibly find for years. Okay, because this is like if you're going to die, basically, and there's literally no other option. And even then, I probably still wouldn't do it because you just don't know, when you're dealing with surgery in the brain and hooking up electrodes to, I don't know. I could be wrong, but personally, I would be super hesitant with this option. The next one is TMS. I've done this. This is really a great thing. There's controversial reviews online because some people say it doesn't work. I noticed an improvement with my therapy, with my OCD when I did this. It's transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's a non-invasive brain stimulation therapy that targets specific brain circuits. Now, what this is you'll lay down and you'll have this machine, or you'll sit up. It just depends on the office that you go into. And it's this machine, and you sit down, and they put this machine kind of on your head, and it has these weird noises. This is kind of like the third party experience that you'll experience, and it kind of is like this, like da, 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 and then it goes da, 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 and then it goes brrr. And it's this it shoots magnetic fields into your brain, and I don't know the exact science. I don't remember the exact science of how it works, but it basically wakes up this part of your brain that is sleeping, and it stimulates the part of the brain that is basically not working correctly, and it really does help. It helped me a lot. It helped me a lot with my OCD. So that's another option, TMS. I did that with the ketamine treatment, and wow, that was a really amazing time for my OCD improvement. The next thing is intensive residential treatment. So these are like OCD centers where you can go for weeks and get treatment for a long period of time. Special OCD treatment centers offering 24/7 intensive ERP and support. So if you're really in a bad situation and you can't even really do ERP and you need like support because just the ERP is too hard, or you're just in such a bad place where you just kind of want to just end everything, like you might need a treatment center, and that's fine. You go there for a week or 2 or 3, and that might change your entire life. I have friends that have been, and it literally saved their life. So go online, search, and residential OCD treatment centers. There's plenty of them, and there's a few that are amazing. There's one in Utah that I have a few friends that went to that literally saved their life. So that's an amazing thing as well. The next thing is psychedelic assisted therapy. This is kind of more, I can't recommend this. I mean, I can't recommend anything because I'm not a doctor, but this is not necessarily legal. I've never done this, but this is psilocybin and MDMA. They've done these clinical trials to treat OCD, and they have done some experiments where it's been successful. I've also watched an Andrew Huberman podcast about this, and he goes into detail about this. Can't really talk about this, but there are studies about this, and they're still kind of ongoing as well. But overall, there's other options besides meds and ERP, but those two are the main two. But if those don't work out over a long period of time, here are your other options. Take a screenshot of this if you need to go back and look at this to be able to reference if the other two things are not working. Okay, to finish up here, I've experienced OCD now for about 20 years. So I'm 30. So yeah, pretty much since I was 10. Crazy, right? It's a long time to experience this terrible thing, but here we are. And I would say intensely, I've experienced it for, let's say, about 10 to 15 years, maybe a little bit more than that. And here's something that I wish I would have done from the beginning. First is keep a journal. I wish I would have kept a journal about every time I would have experienced a bout of OCD, an OCD episode, right? Writing down, okay, I'm experiencing this type of OCD. Here's what's happening. Here's my worry or my obsession. Here's the fear that I have. Here's my compulsions that I want to do. So for example, if it was scrupulosity, my fear is going to hell. Let's say, here's the things that are on my list that I want to confess to my bishop. Here's what I want to do. I want to confess to the bishop. Okay. Let's say I confessed. Okay. Well, right after, I'm going to write down what happens after. Do I feel relief from that confession? Here's how long that relief lasted. Okay. Well, that relief lasted for about a week, and then I felt the guilt again. And the OCD came back for about a week later. So I write that down. And I write down the patterns over a long period of time. Or I write down even, let's say I don't confess. Let's go back to that example. I don't confess. Well, I'm sitting in this anxiety for about a month, let's say every day for a month. And I got the acid reflux and I'm throwing up and whatever, a month long. And it goes away after a month. Well, next time I go back into my journal, I'll know like, okay, but it took about a month. Well, I would have had years of this information if I would have done this. And I started to do this a few years ago, which really has helped now, because now I know like, okay, like I know there's patterns. I've been able to go back and identify patterns that like have really been able to help me to know like how to overcome OCD. And I'll be like, okay, this most likely is going to last now. Like if I don't go in and I don't confess, it's probably going to last like a week. It'll probably be fine after a week. Even though like before though, I didn't know, I'd be like, oh, well, I'm kind of just shooting in the dark here. Okay. So keep a journal of all your obsessions, all your compulsions, all of your ERP exposures, everything. Keep a journal of absolutely everything. Number 2, do the exposures for 4 times as long as you think you need to. So this goes for your practicing. So when you're doing exposures, whether that be in your mind, exposing yourself to the things, whether that be maybe I'm guilty, maybe I'm not, maybe I need to clean my hands, maybe I don't. Maybe, exposing yourself to the dirt in your hands, keeping them dirty 4 times longer than you think you need to. It's going to take a lot more practice than you think you need to do. It really is. You think it's just going to need to take 20 minutes a day? Wrong. Take 2 hours a day. Take 4 hours a day to practice this stuff for years. This is something that is taken over your life. The only way that you're going to break this cycle is if you literally expose for hours upon hours. Okay? Number 3, OCD will come in waves. It doesn't come completely and just stay forever. It will go away. Ride out the waves. Just know it will go away. But it'll only go away if you do what you need to do. Okay, which is the exposures, there's the, going to the therapy, doing the medication, blah, blah, blah. Number 4, You will lose people who do not understand in your life. That could be your friends. That could be relationships. I was married. I am no longer married, okay? That is largely due to the fact that I had OCD and I was with a partner that didn't really understand the situation. You do not want those types of people in your life anyways. Okay? You do not want people in your life that do not have compassion for what you're going through. Forget those people. We want people in our life that are going to understand, everything that we're going through, all the difficulty and all the misery that we have to go through in our mind to beat this disease. And once we figure it out, it's not even a disease; it's just disorder. We'll figure it out. I got it. We got it. You got it. We all got it. Okay, we're gonna beat this. I've beat it. I would consider it beat at this point. You're gonna beat it. And number 5 overall, do not lose hope. I lost hope in this journey before. Okay, many times I lost hope. I've called my mom many times. I've called my friends. I've called my therapist. I'm done. I'm giving up. I'm done. This is it. It's over. Like, I'm going to do what I need to do. You know what I'm talking about. I can't sit on YouTube, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do to end it all. Do not do that. It is not worth it. There is hope. Even though you may think that you've tried everything, you've not tried everything. There's more ways to do things. I promise you. I've done other things. I've done everything. I've done not everything because I didn't try that, the surgery or the MDMA and the psilocybin, but I've done most of the therapies. Things that I didn't think worked, or the things that I didn't think that would really make a difference, I did, and they did do a difference. So don't lose hope. No matter what you do, do not lose hope. And I promise you, if you just stick to this plan, if you seek out help from other people, go to your doctors, get a psychiatrist, go to your county and look for help, okay? Because there's a lot of programs that do offer help. Go find an ERP therapist. Go find other people with OCD, make friends with them, ask them how they've actually recovered. Go find, if you need it, go find basically like a rehab group where you go and stay for 3 weeks. Go do whatever it takes to get better. Go buy all the books at Barnes & Noble about OCD. Go on Amazon, buy all the books about OCD. If you want help, you'll do what it takes to get better, no matter how hard it is. Because how hard is OCD already? I guarantee you it's going to be a whole lot harder to live with the OCD you already have than it is going to be harder. It's going to be a lot harder to live with it than it will be hard to, do whatever it is that you need to do to get better. I promise you, it's going to be way harder to do that. It's going to be harder. So which hard do you want? Do you want the hard of staying the way that you are, or the hard of getting better by doing and putting in the work to heal from your OCD? And then the final thing that I just kind of want to say is another huge thing as well as diet. Are you eating healthy? Are you getting sun? Are you exercising every day? Are you out conversing with people? Do you have friends? Are you just stuck in your room all day? That's not healthy. You need to get out. You need to go and exercise. You need to get out in nature. You need to converse with other people. Are you going to the gym? Are you know what I'm saying? Are you eating vegetables? Are you eating lean meat? Are you eating, are you eating like processed foods? Are you doing toxic behaviors? Are you on self-improvement? These are things you need to do. They will help. They're not everything, but they will help greatly. Okay. Finally, you got this. I believe in you. We're here, baby. And you can do this. Okay. It's going to be hard, but you got this. Lastly, if you do want more help, you can message me. You can reach out. I can offer you some coaching, some one-on-one coaching, and I can help you if you want. It's not necessary. I can't kind of give you everything you need to know if you really want to take it into your own hands. But a lot of the time, you guys need help, as far as specifically putting the plans into action. There's a lot more information if you really want it. And I've figured it out over a long period of time. If you want the help, feel free to message me. If not, you don't need it. Just go for it. Save yourself, man, because no one's coming. It's just you. No one's coming to save you from your OCD. I guarantee you that. That's something I had to realize. Nobody at all is coming. So I hope this guide helps, because, man, I wish I would have had this back in the day when I was suffering with OCD. I had to figure this out myself. And that's why I put this together to hopefully help somebody out there and hopefully save somebody, because I know how valuable this can be. Anyways, until next time, peace out.